So Teesa Bahana is a director of 32 Degrees East, an independent non-profit center dedicated to the transformative power of contemporary art in Kampala, Uganda. As director, she has led the development and execution of projects such as the third and fourth edition of CLAART, Kampala's Public Art Festival, dynamic residency programs, and international exchanges with partners such as Arts Collaboratory and Triangle Network, all while nurturing a thriving artistic community. She's also currently overseeing 32 Degrees East's Capital Project and has raised over 700,000 to date for the first purpose-built art center in Kampala. Phase 1 of the center opened in March 2023 and has since been widely recognized in leading architecture publications. She has been a mentor faculty on multiple art initiatives on the African continent, such as Raw Academy, Makal Bootcamp, while also serving on various panels and advisory committees. She's also a trustee of the Local Works Foundation. Please allow me invite Teesa Bahana.
Very grateful that you're all here. Just really delighted to be a part of this festival. Having been a part of CLAART, now actually 5th edition, I need to update the bio. I know how hard it is to run a festival and just really celebrate what you're doing, Martha, what you're building, and the legacy that you're cultivating. So let's have another round of applause for Martha and the team at Njabala. The talk is about cultivating legacies, and when it came to this question of legacy, and actually also thinking about, how do I talk to people who maybe are very familiar with 32 and then people who aren't as familiar? I was like, okay, this is a challenge, actually. But, if Martha asks, I say yes. So here we are. I think for me, typically when I think of legacy, I often think of old men who are afraid to die and really feel like, they must live forever in some way, and they must be recognized forever. They must have statues, street signs named after them. They need proof to show that they were here on Earth. And I think, that also has to do in many ways with colonialism and the legacy of colonialism, because I think that's also a very particular way of thinking about legacy. And so at first I was like, I don't really know how much I can say about that, because I've never really done the work that I do at 32 Degrees East, constantly thinking about legacy, like what are we gonna leave behind? What are they gonna say about me and 32 and all these, different things. But then I started thinking a bit deeper about, again, legacy and my feelings around it, and that often when, conceiving of legacy, we maybe will never know the kinds of legacies that we'll have, right? Because we're gone, Typically, once you're no longer with us, you don't really know how you've influenced people's lives, what they're saying about you. And then also, typically what happens is after a few generations, no one knows your name, right? Like if you were to ask any of us, name your great-great-great-grandmother. How many of us actually know their names, right? And yet this person, because they were alive, we're alive. And so in reflecting on that, I also was kind of thinking that, we might not know their names, but we still carry them forward in some way, and in ways that we don't even know about, right? Like we're made up of so many of our ancestors and their, relationship to the world, and we carry that forward with us. And so in thinking about legacy, rather than it being something that we leave behind and about our name and our likeness being chiseled in stone, what is it that we can think about carrying forward? And what is it that we feel is necessary to carry forward? What do we feel is missing? What is it that we feel we inherited that we want to see more of? And what is the kind of world that we want to live in now and want to continue to exist. And so that's kind of how I'm thinking about legacy. And I also think that's a more feminist way about thinking about legacy as well. I also really like the phrase cultivating legacy. The thing, just anytime you think about planting, farming, harvesting, it's a very nice thing to say when I'm stuck by a laptop all the time. I don't want to romanticize farming. But I think there is something very nice around think about what is it that we are planting that we want to see grow. What we've been planting at 32 that's been growing and hopefully blossoming, and the intentions behind what we're planting, which we don't always get to talk about. One of the huge things that we often think about, talk about, that many of you feel and experience and live out at 32 is community. Talk about it all the time. And the notion of 32 Degrees East as a home. So if you don't know what 32 Degrees East is, it is a visual arts organization. It's a nonprofit. It's been around since 2011. We have artist studios. We have a residency program. We run a public arts festival, all of these different things. But when I talk about 32, what I often say is it's a home. It's a home for visual artists. It's a home for people who love art. It's a home for people who are just interested in other people and wanting to get to know other people and their lives and how they think and how they see the world. And so if you fall within that category, then 32 is also yours. And, we try to do that in different ways. I think this is a photo of where we started, so I was gonna be inheritance and legacy. So this is where we started, in the shipping containers in Kansanga, and this is where we are now. But meetups, so every first Thursday of the month, we host meetings together that are for members, but they're really, again, open to anyone. And again, thinking about the intention with building community and cultivating community, it's really also to think about working against isolation. A lot of artists before 32 started were often working alone in their studios. The way Kampala can be. In Bweyogere, someone is in Gaba, you're never going to see each other. It just isn't going to happen. People didn't always want to go to each other's studios. There was a level of safety and trust that needed to be developed before that. And then also life happens, your traffic has gotten worse. You just don't want to jump on a border. It's I'll see my people when I see them, and then you don't, because again, life happens. And so to really set this calendar intention of every month, there is a time and a place for people to get together and leave your studio. We have a lot of artists who, have different struggles with mental illness. And so you come as you are. And you know that you're going to see either people that know you really well and, aren't going to judge you, really welcome you as you are, or meet new people who also are just happy to see you. And I think that's also something that is collectively cultivated, and something that I think serves beyond just 32 Degrees East and the walls that we have, but the art scene in general. I think we have a lot of people who have visited from Nairobi, and one of the things they will always talk about is how the community here feels different. And I think that's something that's really special, that also has come from the people who are a part of the space. As part of members' meetups, we have cleanup on Sonko Close, which is where we are located in Kabalagala. The road, it's, as they say, it's a Sisyphean task. So it's, the guy who's pushing the boulder up the hill, and the boulder just always rolls back. That's literally this cleanup. We'll come clean up the street, and someone will throw, you've walked up the road cleaning and then walk back to 32 and you found, a bottle, a straw, whatever. Or people will walk by and they'll be well done, and then not join you. But I think it's also, again, what is it that we're cultivating? And I think it's really about cultivating care and thinking about ourselves as good neighbors, thinking about the fact that, you don't do a thing because you're always working towards this specific metric and this specific goal. You do it because it's worth doing. And doing it in community as well, to know that we can do these things together. You know, eventually maybe we'll get to a point where we pave the road and we put in dustbins or whatever, but we've established the habit of doing these things together and not saying, oh, this organization is going to do it. Oh, KCCA, why haven't they done it? We're doing it together. And also, as we do it, it's also such a nice way of, you know, if someone's intimidated in Meetup by like 30 people in the space, with the picking up rubbish, you pair up with someone and you just get to have a conversation and get to know them a little bit, which another thing a community is thinking about solidarity as well, that we are all part of something bigger than us, and that solidarity really is the thing that can help us with all kinds of struggles that seem impossible. When we also think about what it is we want to cultivate in these times, I think, you know, all over the world, we are experiencing greater political repression. Freedom of speech, freedom of expression is under assault in so many different ways. There are levels of violence that many of us have never seen in our lifetimes. And I think sometimes the tendency with seeing all of that is feeling like it's impossible, right? It's just the tendency is to maybe withdraw and just feel like, well, I'm just gonna do me because the world is, you know, it's a lost cause. But I think also a thing about artists and working in these spaces is we all feel very deeply and we are empathetic, right? Like we are constantly thinking about how other people feel. And so we also have a responsibility to think about how those feelings can translate into power, into action, into possibility. And so we try to also have programming that allows us to feel and all the, you know, feel all the complexities, feel sadness, grief, anger, and also feel some level of hope in each other as well. So this is also an image from a residency we had with Sudanese artists. So also in thinking about solidarity, you know, we have the studio space, and we had a relationship with a funder who, I won't say their name because maybe this is a secret, but basically they were like, we have 3 months where we have to put in a grant and it has to be spent by this date. Is there anything that you have that we can potentially ask for funding for? And so we thought, you know, what is it that we see in our community that is a need that we could fill, that ordinarily maybe would take a longer time to get funding for, but is a very urgent and pressing need. And so we were able to put together a residency for 4 Sudanese artists who had recently arrived in Kampala, and be a space and a base for them as they sort of landed into the city after having to leave their homes, leave their studios, leave, you know, Duma has been a practicing artist for maybe 30 years and had to leave everything behind. And so the studio was able to be this space for him and for the other artists in a way that I think, you know, if we hadn't been intentional about it, wouldn't have happened. Another thing we also really try to cultivate in terms of, you know, what do we want to sow in the world, and sow like planting, you know. Also sow like mending, you know. Kla Art, which is a public arts festival, so I'll just quickly go to some images of previous editions. So that was Odo's work. This is from Sounds of Renewal, from Nilotica Cultural Ensemble. This was a Gaba landing site. This is a work from Sheyi Adelekun at Kamwacha TLC. And with Kla Art, really, I think the larger intention of what we want to carry forward is shifting how we think about public space in this city and how we feel ownership over it, and what we think is possible. And so, you know, in terms of never knowing what our legacy is, I'd like to imagine that some of these kids who saw this work will just think a little differently about what's possible for them, for the city, for scale, for what they can see in their day-to-day. And I think that hopefully, you know, these kinds of experiences also change how you feel in your own body in different places. You know, someone now has a memory of themselves at Gaba landing site, surrounded by people, and not feeling worried that the police are going to come, right? And having like a moment of joy that they didn't have to pay for. And again, like those are things you just don't know what the echoes and ripple effects might be, but the intention really, I think, with Cla Art as a festival in many ways is to shift public's perception of public space and of art and what art can do, what art can mean, who art is for, and that question of who, you know, what art can do, who art is for is also, I think, how we think about the building. So really quick, scenes from the studio. We at the moment have 4 artist studios and a multi-purpose space, but we're working towards building even more. So here are visuals from the center. If you haven't been before, please come if you haven't been. And the building itself, we use earth construction in thinking about the future, the world that we're entering, the world that we're currently in, and how the climate crisis is at the core of so much of what we're experiencing, and yet often is talked about as, you know, a project or a program or, you know, sensitization. And with the building, it's really saying like, this is the thing, that we all can be thinking about how our work is directly in conversation with the times that we're in, and that it can also propose alternatives. In the different things that you can do, how do you think about climate? And that the world that if we have children, if we have nephews, nieces, whoever, right? They're not going to experience the same world that we did, right? And so what kind of world do we want for them? And how can we kind of shape that in these little ways? And so our building is a part of us trying to respond to that. This visual is also just kind of showing our location in the city, and that, you know, who knows, eventually it might be a kind of ripple effect, that what we're doing at 32 with the building, with this kind of building that you typically don't get to see in the city, can provide an example that other ways of building are possible, that we don't always have to build the same way. Even, it doesn't really matter, you know, whatever your budget is, there are other ways of doing things, and not only are there other ways, but also in terms of how we think about artists and permanence and value, in that artists, you know, as a structure, this structure, regardless of who is behind the organization, it is written legally that this structure will always be dedicated to artists, always. Like, even if there's no money in the organization, the building itself will always be for artists. And so what does it mean in terms of legacy to have a space, a physical building that was invested in, right? Like, it's a high budget. It's not little money, but artists deserve that. Because we were also, like, we've had people say, you could have, you know, why didn't you could have built this with this budget, you could have put it, artists deserve a space that is going to make people stop and say, what is that? Like, that is special, right? And what that can do to shift how people, ordinary people, future artists, art haters, what they can then imagine about what's possible. Because if they can think, oh, artists can have that, what else? What else is possible? Because I was told not much. I was told not much happens in the city. Young people can't do very much. Women can't do very. We did that, right? So, yeah, I think I'll end. I think I'll end on that. I was supposed to name names of the people who are, you know, our legacy comes from, but I think just, yeah, they're on the website and Instagram. But yeah, just, I think so much of what we get to do also, you know, I think of Oyinda right now at CCA Lagos. She said when she saw our crowdfunding campaign, she was like, I can do that, right? So like, it's already happening. So we don't have to think about legacy as this thing that is completely multi-generational. Our legacy also starts now. And so I'm also really excited to see, and I also already know the legacy also of this festival and the work Njabala is doing. And I'm like, just all the future women artists out there, right, that will also build off of this work. So thank you.